I'd like to share a special message from United States Senator Chris Van Hollen. Senator Van Hollen shares United Way's commitment to improving lives, and he works tirelessly along with his team to ensure that our state, as well as our country, lives up to their full promise of equal rights, equal justice, and of course, equal opportunity. Let's pause for the video.
Hi, I'm Chris Van Hollen, and I'm very proud to represent our great state of Maryland in the United States Senate, and especially pleased to join with all of you, the United Way of Central Maryland, as you continue your work to help those most in need in our community and focus on the realities of inequality. Inequality in income, racial inequalities, social injustice. Thank you for the work that you do during relatively normal times and during this pandemic. And this pandemic has exposed those inequalities in ways that are even more glaring. Healthcare disparities, income disparities, differences in access to distance learning through high-speed internet, all sorts of inequalities that we must address with urgency. At this moment, we're facing a crisis in our democracy. Just this last week, we witnessed what we thought we would never see in America, a violent mob storming the Capitol of the United States, taking down the American flag and putting up the flag of Donald Trump. I don't care what party you belong to. Our country doesn't pledge allegiance to any one person. We have to respect our Constitution and respect the will of the people through free and fair elections. I hope we will quickly shut the door on this chapter and on January 20th, open up a new chapter with the Biden-Harris administration and with two new members of the Senate elected from Georgia, Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff. The Democrats will now have a razor-thin majority in the Senate and in the House. But we look forward to working with the new administration to tackle the huge challenges we face in our country. And I know President Biden will reach out to Republicans and people of every political persuasion to try to join together as Americans to tackle these issues. I'm pleased that even in these polarized times, the Congress was able to pass the coronavirus relief legislation. It was too late, and it has gaps, but it provides an important lifeline to so many people. You at the United Way of Central Maryland do enormously good work, but you can't do it alone. And I hope the resources that were passed in this legislation will help you with your ongoing efforts. And I thank you for the work you do to address all sorts of needs from housing to food insecurity, to try to make sure that we are a community that lifts one another up, truly in what needs to be the American spirit. We need to renew that spirit, and you at the United Way of Central Maryland are a big part of doing that. That means leaving no one behind, and that means closing these gaps. That means working truly to achieve a more perfect union. That has been the journey of this country for a long time. Let us resume that journey on January 20th. And I thank you all for being part of our effort to build a more beloved community. Thank you. It's an honor to represent Maryland in the United States Senate.
What a powerful message about the challenges we face locally as well as nationally, but also a message of hope for unity, for opportunities that exist. As Senator Van Hollen said, when we lift one another up. You know, in 2017, it seemed like an eternity ago, but just a little over a year into my presidency at United Way of Central Maryland, Senator Van Hollen spoke at one of our events, and he said something that I was thinking about a whole lot last week. In Senator Van Hollen's remarks, the senator cited a quote by Alexis de Tocqueville the French diplomat and philosopher who visited America in the 1800s, and for whom our Tocqueville Society, a group of our most generous champions and donors, is named. Now, here's the quote, which I believe rings so absolutely clear and true today. The quote says this: "The greatness in America lies not in being more enlightened than other nations, but in her ability to repair her faults." Timely message. Chris then pointed out back then that that is our directive as a nation. He said, we were charged to build an ever more perfect union. And to do that, he said, we all needed to be advocates for the causes we care about most. And I have to tell you, I cannot think of a more timely message to open today's session. In fact, now more than ever before, each and every one of us must strive to live and work united to repair the faults in our society, and there are many, right? And to co-create the changes to make our country and the lives of our neighbors and the communities they call home a better place. So I want to thank all of you on this line today for being here with us to learn more about what's being done in the legislative arena and what can you do to help hardworking families and individuals that are spread throughout our region. And so this is the fifth in our Realities of Inequity series, which really does a good job of exploring the barriers that prevent people from really reaching their full potential, that deny them their right to a healthy, and that's so important, stable life, that ban them from the very basics of life security, a safe and secure home, of course, food on the table, and yes, a job that pays the bills. So every 2 years, we issue a comprehensive report, many of you are familiar, that reveals exactly why so many Marylanders can't get ahead. It's called the ALICE Report. So let me begin by defining ALICE for you. ALICE stands for those who are asset limited, income constrained, but yet they're employed. Those who are working really hard but can't make ends meet. These are people, in fact, working 1, 2, sometimes more, typically low-paying jobs like cashiers, clerks, healthcare aides, grocery store workers, delivery service and warehouse employees, and the like. And so the pandemic, as we all are aware, has exposed long-standing obstacles to the success of this population that we call ALICE. It's a population that really is essential workers. This represents our group of essential workers. And think about this. COVID has shown us that these people are essential to maintaining our infrastructures and the operations that allow us to navigate our lives with relative ease, but they can't afford the essentials. Things like, of course, housing, food, healthcare, childcare, and the oh so important transportation, or the technology today's world absolutely demands. Why? Because the cost of living far outpaces what they earn. So even with recent minimum wage increases, low wage earners still face significant challenges. So based on 2018 data, a staggering 39% of Maryland households could make ends meet at that time. That's 2 out of every 5 households in the state of Maryland. And that number is, without a shadow of a doubt, much higher, right, with the impact of COVID-19 on people's livelihoods. And so here it is. It's really important to know that this isn't just a report that we commission and we file on a shelf. We use this report every day to show us where the needs are, to guide our decision making, and also to help improve the well-being of our neighbors and our neighborhoods. And so a companion study, some of you may be aware of this study, as a companion study to the Alice report is our benefits cliff study, which is based on the Alice survival budgets and other helpful information. This study shows the impact of the loss of public benefits to working families that results from small increases in their earned income. And the findings are really serving to really guide our legislative efforts this year. We're excited about that. I want to take a moment right now to just thank Kaiser Permanente, our very generous corporate partner in the Maryland Alice report, as well as the Benefit Cliff study, and all of our other partners for their generous and ongoing support. We share both of these reports freely with anyone. We mean that literally, with anyone, especially our elected officials, but also nonprofits. Some of you are on the call today, other organizations, and also, of course, on our website, with the goal of just helping to increase the awareness of all the challenges that our Alice households face, challenges that have been amplified, as we said earlier, by the pandemic. In fact, COVID-19 has thrown too much uncertainty and stress even into our lives. But there is, believe it or not, there is an upside. This pandemic has exposed inequities that we always knew existed, but we are seeing more and more people stepping up to do something about it, which we really are thankful for. We will hear from just a few of them today. Our panelists share our belief that when we have the facts, and they're so important, when we have the facts, when we are more aware of what's happening to our neighbors, as well as in our neighborhoods, that's when I believe we're fully prepared to make a difference and to really create the change that we really must see in our communities. And so now I'd like to welcome our moderator. So glad to have her, Lisa Harris-Jones. Lisa is an attorney. She's also founding member of Harris, Jones and Malone, LLC, one of Maryland's premier law firms that specializes in state and local government relations. They also specialize in lobbying services. So Lisa is the first and only African-American woman in the state of Maryland to own and effectively manage a law practice that focuses on government relations. And they do a fabulous job of doing that, as well as lobbying, procurement, also government contracts and labor law, which is so needed, and of course, litigation. So Lisa will be leading our advocacy as well as our public policy efforts this year. We're very excited about that. And we're incredibly fortunate to be working with her and her very capable firm and their wonderful group of staff, which has a proven track record for delivering excellent results. And the icing on the cake for all of our participants today is that her services are funded by a longtime partner, the Seamer Institute. Some of you may be aware of them. They're located in Ohio. The Seamer Institute oversees a network of programs for families with school-aged children who are at risk of homelessness, and they have been strong supporters of our family stability programs since their inception in 2012. So Lisa, I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, what does a typical, and I say that carefully, a typical legislative session look like? And what changes can we expect for this 2021 mid-pandemic session?
Sure. This session is going to be very different from what any of us have been used to, whether it's from a legislator, an advocate, a lobbyist, whoever has been a part of working during the General Assembly, where in the past you would see just last year there were 2,745 bills introduced while 600 passed. This year, we are unlikely to see that many bills. I know that legislators are going to be focusing on what they're considering priority legislation. Anything from, of course, the budget. They have to pass a balanced budget. COVID-19 response, and these are matters that greatly affect the work of the United Way. from economics to education to housing stability. You'll see bills concerning racial equity and inclusion, everything from environmental injustice, general wealth and healthcare disparity legislation, and of course, police reform. So I think that of the bills that you'll see moving, and right now we have somewhere close to 782 pre-filed bills. We're not expecting too many more after that. At the most, I hope that there may be only a thousand more bills, if that. But those are the bills that are going to be of the primary focus of both houses, as opposed to a hodgepodge of several different subject matters that you would see in a general, normal, non-virtual session.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that helpful frame. Another question I have for you is this. What did 2020 bring that forever changed you, whether it's personally or professionally? That would be helpful for our participants to hear.
Sure. I saw that question before this afternoon, and I think it's a pretty heavy question. And I'm having a hard time focusing on specifically on the personal side. I would say on the personal side, it would be the appreciation of family and friends, because of the inability to be around my mother and other family members, and even my son, who is back and forth from college, and because of social distancing issues and COVID related matters. It's been very hard this past year, and it makes you appreciate those friends and family that you may have taken for granted, but now you can't be as close to. And also personally, with Black Lives Matter, and having three African American sons, and what this past year, the negative, and the bad, what we see on TV, and the concerns with how people are treated. And I had my 18-year-old son had a gun pulled on him in the spring, because someone thought he was casing a bank when he was merely just drinking a drink at 7-Eleven coming from school. So that's been very heavy, and has changed me as far as how I see things in life. Professionally, it has to be Zoom. The appreciation that you can get a lot of work done virtually and quickly, because of the great invention of Zoom.
So thank you so much. And I guess you'll take it from here as our moderator. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Sure. So I first want to send a question over to, and I think everyone knows who we have here today. We're lucky to have the delegate from the great city of Baltimore, District 43, Regina Boyce. We have Mike Kelly, who's the executive director of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, Terry Neumeier, who is the chairman of the board, and he's with KCI. And then we have my favorite lobbyist in the whole wide world, and a great person is Karen York, CEO of Job Opportunities Task Force. And I'll start with Delegate Boyce, and I will hope that she can answer the question much better than I just did. But can you share with those that are listening what did 2020 bring that forever changed you, either professionally or personally?
Yeah, I think like you, Lisa, and thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to be here among you all. The word forever, I think, threw me off. I think we're never forever changed. I think we're always momentarily changed from moment to moment. And I think this moment, for me, brought personal and professional perspective. I think you touched on it most, Lisa. For me, is family. I live in a city. My family lives in a county. I can't see them as I would like to see them. I mean, at this point, I really can't even touch my mom, because she works in a high risk profession. And so I can see her. And when I do see her, it's through a mask. And so those are the things. But what I'm thankful for is that, it's like the more things change, the more things stay the same. And yet through this whole year, what we've seen is innovation, innovation to meet through Zoom, innovation to actually, write letters to people, innovations to like, oh my God, there's a phone, call people and chat with people. And so many people were so appreciative just to get a phone call to just, shoot the breeze. And I would say though, but what has been evident and forever, I guess I can put it in that forever change for me, is that even one person can make a change, even if they're the person who initiates the change. And we saw that time and time and time again through this year, through of course, the social inequities brought back. So I would say that, professionally, personally, and politically, that we all can make a change.
Thank you. And I'm going to throw the same question over to Mike, and I'll ask that everyone take a minute to answer the question.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. And Franklin, thank you to you and your team for having me today. I'm answering this sitting in a basement with 3 elementary school age kids having recess upstairs. And I say that in part to apologize in advance for whatever walks through the door behind me, but also to point out that this year is hammered into me and my family how lucky we are. My wife and I both work full time. We're both on these calls all day, and we've been able to manage this. We've been able to get through. And the reality for so many families in our region is that they can't, is that this has been much more difficult, and that those of us who are able to get through this relatively unscathed need to appreciate it and need to really strive to understand why that is and what changes we can create to reduce some of the inequities that allow some of us to be comfortable through this while so many more are struggling. So I'll leave that there, but thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you. Karen, can you answer the question as well?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Franklin and the United Way staff. I'm happy to join as both CEO of JOTF, but also a United Way board member. So, just piggybacking off of Mike's, remarks, 2020 and everything that happened in 2020, personally, of course, reminded me how privileged I am to be able to work remotely and be able to, still do what I can do without any real strain to me, both personally or professionally. But what 2020 also revealed, or more so underscored to me, both personally and professionally, is something that the Job Opportunities Task Force has really been advocating and pushing and educating about for, quite honestly, the past 25 years. And that's just that our policies are just not enough to ensure that our working families can get by, whether it's a pandemic or not. And so 2020, as we navigated the pandemic, while we're very thankful and excited for many of the policies that are on the books that over the years have sought to really support the trajectory of our workers and our working families to economic opportunity, security, and success, they're woefully insufficient. And it really just served as a reminder of how important it is for us to continue to remain advocates, both in our personal and professional capacities, around educating everyone about what it's like to just live and survive and deal with many of the dynamics that many of our folks are having to navigate.
Thank you. And Terry, do you have thoughts with respect to this question as well?
Sure, I do. And again, thank you to Franklin and yourself for doing this today. I'm a United Way board member also, and I chair the Public Policy Committee. Professionally, I'm just amazed at how successful the work at home environment developed in the employer market. We've been uber successful in the work at home market. I think that will stay with us, not full time, but I'm going to say 15 to 20% of our workforce will continue to work from home. And we have 1,800 employees around the country. And I don't think that all of them are coming back to work post-pandemic. So I think that's a big permanent change that happened. And personally, acknowledging that the needs of the needy increased during this pandemic, and that the one group that stepped up to the challenge was the United Way. And personally, I saw a need for United Way to fill a gap that was very helpful for those needy. And it caused me to rethink our corporate campaign, as well as a personal giving mantra to give more money to the United Way and undesignated funds so that they could use that to fulfill the needs of the needy.
Thank you. Delegate Boyce, last year was, as this will be your third legislative session as a member of the Maryland General Assembly, tell us a little bit about your experience over the past several years and what did you learn and what surprised you?
Thanks, Lisa. My experience have been like multifaceted. You learn quickly that all relationships, no matter who they are important, but critically important in meeting the immediate and long-term needs of Marylanders. So, I'm advocating for one bill, but I need 5 different advocates. And as I get these advocates and these expert um, uh, knowledge individuals, I look again and I'm missing like 5 more people. So really knowing who are the players and how you best support the initiatives that your constituents give to you. There's always a ton of information coming at you all at once, and having to have the time and the space and the organization to filter it all. But again, needing those relationships to help manage it all. Become subject matter experts, but quite frankly, I always tell people like I know a little bit of everything, but I'm not a walking encyclopedia. Like I can't know every little thing, and that's why those relationships really matter. Good legislation takes research. It takes actually good data analysis, and it's dedicated subject matter experts as well as your committee advocates to vet it, so it gets to the finish line. So it gets to the point, as, Karen beautifully put, that it is not inadequate, and so a lot of work goes into it. What has surprised me the most is the speed of session. It begins, it's exciting, and then you blink and it's over. And you're like, there's like a plateau, but it's just over, and it kind of shocks you. And so it does move fast. Sometimes you're talking to somebody who's like, yeah, last week we talked about that. It's like, no, that was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so it is a fast pace. So thank goodness for good staff and good partners to get through it all.
So Mike, Delegate Boyce pointed out the importance of research and data and how critical that information is important for as I am a lobbyist and to share with legislators when you're looking at issues and discussing policy and legislation. United Way's Alice report on barriers to economic stability is one tool that, as Franklin mentioned earlier, that only helps guide his organization's work, but is shared freely with elected officials, community partners, and others to help them identify existing and emerging needs. Tell us about the research and reports the Baltimore Metropolitan Council produces and how you share that information and leverage what you learn to help drive positive change for people and communities they live in.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. So BMC we represent essentially the same footprint as the United Way of Central Maryland. Our board includes the mayor of Baltimore and elected officials from around the region. And we do research in a lot of areas, but one of the key ones is the labor market. And I'll talk about 2 reports that I think might be helpful for this group today. The first is a report we do on family supporting jobs. And these are jobs that pay $22 an hour or more to somebody with an education less than a bachelor's degree. And these jobs are really critical for Alice. But the challenge is they represent only about 13% of the job market. It's a really tiny share for a community that needs so much. What we do in this report is identify what the occupations are and what some of the training might be, what some of the potential for people to get these jobs is. But the second step, and the other report I'll talk about, is a report we do on barriers to employment opportunity. And every few years, we survey job seekers around the region. The last time we did this was in 2019. And we asked these job seekers to self-identify the challenges that they face when they're trying to gain meaningful employment. And This survey lifts up issues ranging from the cost of living to childcare to mental health to addiction issues. And one of the main takeaways is that no job seeker has the same set of challenges. So one of the things we really need to think about is flexibility and creativity in the entire workforce development system to allow people to respond to their needs. And speaking specifically of Alice and the benefits cliff, one of the questions we ask is about benefits. And in the Baltimore metropolitan region, 38% of the people we surveyed specifically cited concerns over earning too much money, earning so much money that they would lose the benefits they need for their family. And it really hammers home the idea that Alice isn't an abstract idea. It's not a PowerPoint or report. It's thousands and thousands of people in the region who want to improve their lives, but are held back by institutional and bureaucratic reasons that we really need to reconsider.
Thank you. Karen, you're passionate for low-wage earners and job seekers. As COVID has taken a high toll on people working in low-wage jobs, many of them women and people of color, what are some of the ways you've seen advocacy break down barriers to education and sustainable jobs?
Thank you. So, the pandemic, COVID, the quick ending of the 2020 legislative session, it really underscored the need for us to lean into the different ways that we can use advocacy on behalf of communities. So one is understanding how policy reforms can be broken down into what we call big P, which is your legislative, your administrative, your regulatory policy, but also your little p, which is of equal importance. And that's your agency policies, that's your boardroom policies that are more so practices. Both are equally important and really can help drive home some real robust policy reforms and change. And then if you are really clear about that and you're able to juxtapose that against this idea of working across the aisle, then you're really able to identify opportunities that can really help folks in a way that you couldn't imagine. And so, a piece of legislation, a legislative success that JOTF and partners worked on years ago, well, not too many years ago, but that really incorporated, the big P, little p, and brought together Democrats and Republicans, was this idea of banning the box on college applications. So many individuals are familiar with ban the box on job applications, the box that you have to check if you've ever been arrested or convicted of a crime. Many times that box was used as a filtering mechanism to deny employment opportunities to very qualified individuals. What many did not know was that that question was also on college applications. And we say that education is the ticket out of poverty, that everyone, if you want to, should be able to go to college and be able to attain the skills and the wages necessary to be economically secure. But yet we were denying that opportunity to individuals with a criminal background. When this issue became front and center, it was amazing how both Democrats and Republicans came together to support this, and it passed in its first year, and we became the first state in the nation to have this policy on the books, because it made absolutely no sense that your past would deny you an opportunity to get an education. And so being able to work with both the legislature, but also the educational institutions to make sure that this policy could really be realized was an example that we hope to use in the future, and especially hope to use as we try to dig as many people out of the devastation that they've found themselves in as a result of COVID.
Thanks. Terry, as an employer, I think we'd like to hear from you. KCI's core purpose is to care for and improve the environment to better our society, and your company's commitment to improving society extends to how you support your employees. Tell us about some of the ways KCI responds to help ensure your employees who may be struggling with finances or other issues.
Great, Melissa, thank you. First I want to talk that as an employer, someone who is in financial distress, or Alice, does not have a marker on their forehead that says, hey, I'm in trouble. And in fact, the opposite occurs. These are hidden. They're not proud to announce this to their fellow coworkers, so they're not going to sit there and come forward and let you know this. And so, as an employer, we always want to respect our workers' privacy, which has a good thing in that you're respecting their privacy, but it has a bad thing in that if they are in trouble, they're probably not going to reach out to the employer and you're not going to know about it. So I wanted to elaborate on 4 things that employers do, which KCI does, and then kind of give you one little tip. And the 4 things are, first is, you heard Karen talk a little bit about education being this key to out. And so what we do at KCI is that we offer a tuition reimbursement program, prepaid ahead of time, asking people to improve themselves, get a new skill, get an education. And it can be for anything. It doesn't have to be in my business engineering. It can be whatever you'd like it to be. The second thing is that if people do get in trouble, you offer an employee assistance program. You offer a place where they can anonymously reach out to somebody to say, hey, I'm in trouble financially. I have an elder care issue. I have a kid issue. I have a drug issue, something like that. And we have that. The third thing is we look to respect people that are having children and want to stay in the workforce. And so offering a maternity benefit, paternity and maternity benefit associated with giving people paid time off where they get off for 4 to 6 weeks using a company paid short-term disability policy, as well as a maternity benefit helps. And last but not least is that we offer this company paid retirement plan, which helps people in the retirement sector. Now, most of the people that are, going to be economically disadvantaged aren't going to necessarily participate in these things. So when we talk about 401ks and saying, hey, we're going to do a 401k match, they may not be able to afford to contribute to that. Remember, in Franklin's slide, someone who is Alice, a family of 4, needs $87,000 a year to make ends meet. And so, hey, one tip is to look at this is that when people are borrowing from these retirement plans, they can borrow from these 401ks. That's a sign. It's a sign that someone might be in financial distress. And that sign, if you're not buying a house, you don't have a medical issue, you're not funding an education, there isn't something that came up that you, the employer, would know about. If they start borrowing against those retirement plans, it could be a sign that they need help and you should be there to help them.
Sure. Mike, just following up on some of the things that Cherry just shared. I know that the Baltimore Metropolitan Council has a regional recovery dashboard that monitors labor and employment trends and has done that since the onset of the pandemic. What does it show us in terms of job sector, in terms of how jobs have been affected, and what do you anticipate the long-term impact will be on hardworking people here in this region and who are trying to get ahead, and what can be done from a legislative perspective? And if you can just share with us as quickly as you can some thoughts on that question.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. So at the outset of the pandemic, one of the first things our board asked us to do was to sort of tap into the technical ability we have and start sharing real-time information as much as possible. Because, if there's any big takeaway, one I didn't mention from 2020 is that facts are facts and facts are nonpartisan. So we've got a dashboard, I think it's going to be shared in the chat, that is sharing all sorts of regional data about this. In terms of the economy, we identified a number of employment sectors that we refer to as the most exposed sectors. These are the ones most likely to be negatively impacted. It's retail, it's transportation jobs, it's restaurants and bars. It's what you would expect, but it represents 250,000 jobs in our region's economy. It's a huge number of jobs. And in these exposed sectors, over 60% of the workers earn $15 an hour less. So the short end of the labor market story is that we know the places being hurt and the people being hurt are most likely to be our low wage earners, which is really challenging. So pivoting to what can happen in the legislative session, there's no magic solution to this. Right now, while people have to stay at home, while people can't work, while people have to be safe, we need to support the most vulnerable as much as possible. And I know the governor announced a package today. I know the leaders in the House and the Senate are considering things. The federal government's going to look at more stimulus. And the short term is making sure that we make the best investments and the wisest investments that offer immediate aid to people. Long term, when we think about the economy and we think about the labor market, I would look to some of the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission about reforming adult education, about involving employers, and about treating these non-white collar jobs as careers and vocations and respectful ways to earn a living. Long term, I think those are the solutions, but in the short term, it's really going to be about making sure the folks who are most in need can get through the next few months. Thank you.
Thanks. Delegate Boyce, as United Way is a strong example of how partnerships with communities and corporate leaders can drive lasting changes. And you have been a long-term community advocate. You worked previously in the position with Strong City Baltimore, and you have worked in the area of focusing on developing, leveraging strategic partnerships. And I've seen that with your work over the past several years in the General Assembly. Can you share with us what type of legislation that may have passed last year or you will continue to work on this year that will be of some assistance to the groups that we're talking about today, and how the partnerships with United Way and the community and corporate leaders will strengthen the proposed bills?
Thanks so much. I had to do a lot of research on this because I wanted to get a couple of them right, and I wanted to bring up bills that really lend themselves to the unfortunate criminalization of poverty that passed last session. And so bills, for instance, like Delegate Pam Queen's bill, HB 14, that you know, equal pay for equal work. We know that some of our folks, even our Alice folks, may not get paid the same as someone else, and why, and prohibiting someone for having adverse effects to them if they then ask about it and ask about, hey, I am looking for a raise, or I'm not being paid the same as somebody else who does the same work. Wage history and wage range. That was Delegate Karen Lewis Young. HB 123 requires their employer on request to provide an applicant for employment the wage range for the position for which the applicant has applied for. When we talk about trying to get a leg up, the position looks like something that may be more, but it may not be. And then potentially asking me what I was paid for at a previous job, because I know what I'm worth and I know what these jobs are meant for, then being denied that opportunity, are other things that keep folks down. We want to talk about little silly things. I think Karen mentioned it earlier about little ridiculous things that keep an individual like Alice down, like legislating against or giving someone a penalty because the tag on your plate is maybe a little raggedy and it's falling down, but I can essentially be fined and potentially lose my registration over that. And so changing the laws to not do something like that, which then puts someone who's already potentially struggling in increased financial debt, which is again ridiculous. And of course, Delegate Al Carr passed Bill HB 46, which essentially removes the ability to take someone's registration based on unpaid traffic tickets, for instance, by a speed camera or such. And so again, we're talking about bills that are removing the barriers that would also keep Alice down, right? So these bills, in my opinion, were important because we're talking about those things that hinder these individuals. Now I've got debt on pile of debt on pile of debt. Now I don't have a car. Now I can't get to work, and the cycle begins, the downfall. And so I thought those were important. I would say from a standpoint of one bill last session that was an example of strong effort is the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. We know education and a grounded education, and coming from adult education myself, is highly important. It is the next step for if somebody wants to go to college, if somebody wants to do vocation, if they want to get into training and do a certification. If the foundation is not good, the rest isn't. And it was so nice to see so many people, whether it was business, whether it was, of course, education advocates, whether it's unions and workforce developments and government coming together saying education matters, and a competitive education matters, because let's be honest, somebody's got to do my job and your job in the future. And if we're not training up the folks to do it, it's not going to happen. And even as Mike mentioned, with adult education, not sexy, people don't like to talk about it, but it is also necessary too, to continue to train up individuals. And so that is what I think the biggest bill of coordination and partnership I saw last session. Who wasn't on it, who didn't believe it, and who didn't think that it was important? Because again, we need to fill our jobs in the future and of course close the gap that already exists.
Thanks. Terry's going to share with us some of the things as he's chair of the Public Policy Committee, but he'll be sharing with us what the legislative agenda is going to look like for United Way this coming session and the efforts and relationships the United Way is looking to make to support the ALICE population. Because as Delegate Boyce accurately pointed out, in order to see long-term change that's required to ensure that people can lead economically stable lives, certain laws and policies have to change. But before we do that, if Karen, if you could quickly, you know, we know that your work is meant to break down barriers for education and employment in that area of looking out for those that are in ALICE and alike. How can those who are struggling every day just to get by advocate for themselves, knowing that they're already shouldering a heavy burden? If you could share some of that with us quickly, we'll throw it straight over to Terry to talk about the agenda for this coming session.
Sure, thank you. And I thank Delegate Boyce and Mike for your comments. You know, highlighted a number of things. One of the things that's a major theme that folks are dealing with, we talk about workers that are, you know, struggling right now and how do they get out of it? You know, you have workers that are being penalized and criminalized as a result of their poverty and by extension race. So criminalization of poverty is a common theme that we have seen and it has been exacerbated in the pandemic. But when we talk about what is it that workers can do to learn more about their situation or to be in the know, I think it's also important to make sure that we recognize and remember that workers are struggling, right? They're struggling to just survive. And many times access to the resources that's going to help them dig out of their situation is non-existent because in many of our communities, access to information isn't a thing. And then you add on this thing called the digital divide, where now that many of us are home, you can't even get that access electronically because you either don't have the devices or you live in a neighborhood where broadband access isn't a thing. And so it's incumbent, therefore, upon community-based organizations and the like JOTF and others in United Way, to ensure that they are constantly getting that information out to individuals and getting it out in a way where it's not too wonky, it's not overwhelming, but it's something that they can digest and absorb and they can actually act on so they feel that they have the information necessary to advocate on behalf of themselves. But, you know, when we talk about access to resources and what do individuals need to be able to advocate for themselves, we have to make sure that we're talking about just the information, just the access to information resources and access in a way where folks get it, understand it, and then can do what they need to do to move forward.
Thank you. Terry, you want to share with us a little bit about the Public Policy Committee and what you guys are going to be working on this session?
Sure, will do. Wanted to tell you that, you know, at United Way, the Public Policy Committee, United Way, is about organizing and advocating for issues that are germane to us. And think lobbying, think local governmental, as well as the Maryland General Assembly, as things that we would do for the people that are in need. We separated into three categories. We got together and we knew we couldn't do it all. So we said, let's be really great at something. That's where you see lead. And then other things, we'll let other people partner with us. Maybe they'll take the lead. That'll be engage, and monitor means, hey, we're interested, but we're just not going to do it. So if I could go back to the lead slide, what we want to lead this year is we want to position Marylanders for economic stability. And if you think of United Way's 4 pillars of housing, education, health, and employment, this was making sure that people wouldn't become homeless, people had food benefits, had health benefits, and things of that nature. And again, making sure that that continued. So this is a core mission of United Way, and we will do that in this calendar year on a legislative effort. And the second item we would lead on is easing the financial burden of that benefits cliff. If somebody doesn't want to make more money because they're going to fall off that benefits cliff, we think there should be a gradual stepping down of that versus a cliff. And so a gentle slope, not a cliff. On the engagement side, these are the things that we're talking about. When you look at addictions, that's homelessness, and SNAP benefits is food and health, and closing the digital divide. Karen talked about that. And our last thing that we chose to monitor are items that are all important to United Way and certainly the people that need, but it's not something that we will take a lead on. But again, they have their importance. And so I'm not going to go over this individually on these slides, but just say that, hey, we will be monitoring legislation or things at both a state and local level that could be impactful to our United Way stakeholders in either the housing, education, employment, or health sectors. And with that, I'll turn my time back over to you, Lisa.
Sure. For a final question for everyone, and Terry, since we have you up on the screen, you can answer this quickly. What is the most critical legislation you foresee in the 2021 session that could impact working families and individuals who struggle to make ends meet?
So, we think that this is going to be related to the housing sector and making sure that people who aren't currently homeless become homeless. And so it's very important that evictions and things of that nature and programs associated with people being able to maintain their housing programs are very important for us. And obviously you saw that as our #1 agenda item.
Thanks. Delegate Boyce, what do you see as an important piece of legislation for this session?
I think everything is going to be important, unfortunately, as it relates to our most vulnerable workers. I write all of this down all the time, right? So we're in a pandemic. We're still battling a pandemic. Overriding the vetoes are going to be important. Balancing the budget with an $800 million deficit or more, and also still meeting the priorities of families who are really on the edge, on the cliff of maintaining housing or on the verge of losing housing. So there will be a lot of housing legislation. Of course, there's, police reform, and then there's unemployment reform. And of course, the most basic, the package to help continue to manage and help families and business as it relates to COVID-19. And so, of course, trying to figure out quickly, intentionally, thoroughly, and in partnership, the digital divide, because I'm going to keep spitting it as I've spit it. It's less about an access and it's more about the literacy. People will not take on something that they do not understand and have not been able to need. And so the workforce is going to have to start talking about digital literacy within workforce training programs, because half of our workforce doesn't even use it.
Thank you. Karen?
Yes, so 2 quick ones. One has to do with pretrial defendants. More and more judges are assigning pretrial defendants to home detention. But unfortunately, home detention comes with a cost. So individuals are having to pay for their GPS monitoring, the box on their ankle. In pretrial, those costs can range from $10 to $17 a day. So we have individuals, low-income workers who have not been found guilty. They're paying anywhere up to $500 every 2 weeks for a box on their ankle. And if they cannot afford it, they go to jail. That is the criminalization of poverty. The second is also an extension of the criminalization of poverty. It has to do with car insurance rates. The idea that auto insurance companies are using non-driving factors to set insurance premiums, things like credit, education, income, and zip code. And so you can imagine who's paying more for car insurance. You have to have insurance if you're going to have a car and be on the road. If you're driving without insurance, it's an incarcerable offense. And so individuals are in turn being incarcerated because they cannot afford what's required by law. And so 2 things we'll be working on this session is eliminating home detention fees for pretrial defendants, those who can't afford it, and finding another means for them to be able to be monitored and the like, but also ensuring that car insurance companies are not using, especially in a pandemic when folks are dealing with reduced hours and lost wages and the like, are not using non-driving factors. We run a training program, and when we run estimates for our individuals who are placed in construction and now need a car and need insurance, one of the individuals who lived in Park Heights, one of the estimates was $675 a month for liability only. High school graduate, lived in Park Heights, didn't have the best credit. And so that's what we're talking about here. And so it's little things like that that we want to make sure that we address this upcoming session that will have some major impact.
And Mike, do you have anything to add?
Just that it's going to be a truncated session. There's going to be a lot flying around, and first and foremost, I'm hoping the legislature can focus on the families in need and what we can do in the very short term, because the most of these long-term solutions are going to get much harder if people's economic conditions get worse.
Thanks. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for their time today. If you have any questions that wasn't answered, we're sharing their email information that right now, so that if you need to reach out to them, and we want to make sure that you don't miss our next Realities of Inequity session on February 11th at noon, where we'll be unpacking ongoing and new needs in mental health support. And in mid-spring, we'll be following up with an invitation to a panel presentation on outcomes of the 2021 legislative session. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us today, and have a great week.